Hey team, welcome to week 7. I'd like to take some time to recapitulate the last week's activities, and I want to pay particular attention to your proposals and your annotated bibliographies from week 6, offering a couple insights. And then I want to move into giving you a quick overview of the work that we'll do for week 7. And I want to pay particular attention there to the first draft that's due in week 7. So the first draft comes piggybacking right after your proposal. Um, and so I want to start by making some observations about that proposal. Some students did incredibly well with this activity by being very specific about exactly what they want to study in their coming paper. But I would say most students, probably 90% of students in this class, really are in danger of not having a concise enough context um, to move forward with academic inquiry. And if you are one of these students, as you most likely are with such a high percentage there, I want you to understand, I want to make sure that you understand what context is. I've iterated and reiterated this point so many times in these videos. Back in week 2, I think it was, I posted my supplementary video on what is context, but even still, students don't seem to really get it. And it's not just in this class, it's really every time. Students seem to not want to make the connection that context is always to start with what your passions are. When I meet with students during online office hours, and students just have really no idea about what they want to write about, or they have no idea how to chisel something broad down to something narrow, I always ask them to start from square one, which is outside of literature, outside of literary inquiry. Tell me what your supreme passion is. What could you write a treatise on, a book on, go into detail on for 25 years, right? Teach classes on for 25 years, something that you would never tire of investigating and unpacking and problematizing, right? You always want to start there. Then I ask them specific questions to get them to the crux of their interests, right? Narrowing down now maybe 1 or 2 or 3 very specific things that they really care about and why they care about those things. Then we take that medley and we see how we can read that into any of the text for the course. That's the beauty of context. That is what's going to get you where you need to go in this class. For some reason, I find increasingly students are resistant and apprehensive and unsure about how they can actually take course materials and texts and make them relevant in a personal way. That scares me a lot. It alarms me so much. It's not where I think we should be going with academia. I have so many conferences scheduled this week with students, which is a great thing. If you haven't gotten a time yet, make sure that you do. Students often leave office hours feeling like they have a much better sense of context, at least a square one to begin at. The second thing I want to address about the proposals is several students actually decided to write about texts as primary texts in their paper that aren't course texts. It absolutely blew my mind. I don't even know why a student would ever think that it would be appropriate to talk about texts that were not course texts as primary texts. It just makes a lot of sense that you want to use course text as your primary text of investigation for the course. On the other hand, in the academic genre, you have license to bring in any other supplementary text that you want. So if you want to bring in Alice Walker, you want to bring in, excuse me, you want to bring in, whatever, Thomas Mann, or you want to bring in, whatever, Jurassic Park. You can bring in any number of texts, any number of supplementary texts that you'd like as a way to enhance your line of inquiry around that primary text. But you cannot, guys, bring in any old American text that you'd like, that you just enjoy, or that you've written about in high school, or that you wrote about last semester, or whatever, and think it's going to be okay to highlight a text of your own choice outside of the scope of the course as the primary text of a paper, right? Absolutely not, right? When you become an academic and you're publishing your own work, you can choose any text that you'd like, right? But when you're in a course, it's very important that you are highlighting the course text. So keep that in mind as you go forward. I was very surprised to see a couple students in this class receive feedback from me on their earlier drafts or their sentences or their ideas, in which I said to them, you have to use course text. And then even still in the proposal, they weren't using any course text. And so it makes me wonder whether or not students like this are reading the comments that I leave for them on their deliverables. So I want to make a plea here as we move into week 7 that if you are a student who hasn't been reading feedback um, that I've been leaving for you here in Blackboard, it's going to definitely be detrimental to you when you get to the final paper. Why you wouldn't read comments that I leave for you, I don't know. That's a personal thing that I don't personally understand. But if you are a student who hasn't read comments, now is your time to go back and read those comments and make sure that you're using them to move forward strongly into week 7. Here in week 7, we're addressing the genre of the short story, the short piece of fiction. We're taking a look at works by Melville, Hawthorne, and James. James kind of straddles the line between being British and American. He's a very interesting figure, one of my favorite writers. And you'll notice, first off, that all of these authors are male. And you'll notice, secondly, I hope, that certainly an aspect of masculinity comes into question in these texts. And you know from me, one of my specialties is masculinity theory, masculinity studies. It's a branch of gender criticism. It's a branch of feminist theory. I'm always interested, especially when I read Bartleby, for example, to interrogate how masculinities come forth in this text. And in this week's forum, I want you to take each of those short stories from each of those authors and to, you know, um, address all of the works by the authors and put them in the context of how do these works articulate an Americanness, and also how do they resist Americanness. One thing that comes to mind for me is what seems to be the American male here in these 19th century texts, right? And also how does alternative forms of Americanness play a role here? What is Americanness for these authors in the 19th century? So you have a lot of interrogation to do this week, and I'm so excited to read your responses to these great authors. Coming up also in week 7, I want to spend particular emphasis this week talking about your rough draft. Now, your rough draft today, I want you to treat it very, very seriously, because the more emphasis you place on this rough draft, the more effort that you put forth, the longer it is, the more revealing it is of your ideas at this point in your development, at this point, the better feedback you're going to get from me. So those of you that can even give me 12, 15 pages of a rough draft, you guys are going to get the kind of feedback that is going to guarantee that you'll feel confident as you move into the final draft. Those of you that provide me with an outline that's bare bones, you guys are going to get hardly any feedback on that, right? It's because it's very hard for me to read your mind in terms of what your intentions are, how those intentions are going to play out. If you do give me an outline, it's going to be very hard for me to engage with that in a way that's going to help you to move forward. A rough draft can take a wide variety of forms, right? It can be a bare bones outline. It can be a medley of, blurbs of paragraphs where you're unpacking ideas, but it could just not be put together yet. It could be a medley of particular quotations that you find, will probably be playing a role in your essay. It could be the development of, let's say, just one section, or the development of one primary text and you haven't brought in the second primary text yet. It could be, a wide range of things, going all the way to a full, cohesive, rough draft of your final essay. That's what I want you to actually aspire toward this week. That's going to give you the best feedback. For your rough draft too, I want to make sure 2 things. I want to make sure that you are writing in a firm context. And I want to see that you are making please at least one argument. By the time you get to your final essay, you should be making a series of arguments that build on each other, right? But one thing that I saw in the proposals from last week is that very few students are really making arguments at all. Even those who use the proposal format in which they say, this is my argument, it wasn't an argument at all. It was more like an observation. Keep in mind that an argument is always a judgment. Plain and simple. You have to be saying that something is good or something is bad. Just basic, right? That's an argument. Something is right and something is wrong, right? An argument. If there's no judgment being made in your observation, it's an observation. It's not an argument, right? You have to keep that in mind. So as you go forward, work with that. I am here to work with you moving toward your rough draft, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys are going to come up with in this next step, in this next milestone toward your final paper. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you here next week. Bye for now.